Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave. This week we are doing Earthbound. This is an interesting one. This is quite a significant one. It's a controversial one. It's the only King Crimson album I have on vinyl. There it is. Reddington Rare Records charged me 15 quid for this, even though it's in a terrible state, if you can see it. There's some drips of something on it or something, I don't know what it is. I only own about 10 records. But I had to have this because, of course, Fripp had deleted this. He went to great lengths to get it deleted because it doesn't do the band justice, the sound is bad, etc, etc. And in the end it was re-released because, well, everything always comes back in the end, doesn't it? And it was a shock getting this because I hadn't heard anything like it. It was just, you know, I knew Sailor's Tale, and I didn't know Groon at the time, and the rest of it is jams actually, except for Schizoid Man, which is just awesome. But it was surreal because the sound is so bad. I wasn't ready for it, and playing it on my manky old record player on this dodgy old record, I didn't know how much of that was part of it. You know, it was kind of just that's just what it sounds like. It was a contractual obligation, so the band split up. This is after the '72 tour. Fripp was told, although he was trying to get another band together, he was told you have to release another album. So they put together a live album from these tapes. There were only soundboards, so there's nothing they could do to fix it, at least at the time. And there was actually a disclaimer on the back. It actually says, the recordings were captured live on an Ampex stereo cassette fed from a Kelsley Morris custom-built mixer operated by John Robson and Hunter MacDonald on Schizoid Man and Grune and Hunter MacDonald and the other titles. Jacksonville in the rain from the back of a Volkswagen truck. VCS 3 operated by Hunter. So yeah, in the rain from the back of a Volkswagen truck gives the game away. It's a disclaimer because the sound quality is so bad. Should have been a double. If they, releasing a live album from this great band should have been a double. It's just random bits which mutes the energy of it, which is why generally people really loved 21st Century Schizoid Man, because it opens the album and felt the rest of it was rubbish kind of thing. I mean, it's kind of half-arsed. I mean, is it that Fripp didn't see any value in live albums? I don't know. But obviously at that point he's getting together this new band. He's talking to Bruford and getting new people, and isn't going to be that interested in doing this, so he's just going to get a record out, isn't he? You know, someone with a love for that band wouldn't have done this. They'd have got a lot, well, not, it may not have been a complete show, but a double album of most of the stuff would have been appropriate. Also, if they'd had access to the recordings we have now, that would have helped. And it's amazing to think this was all there was of this band until Collectors Club No. 2 in 1998. Hard to believe, but there it is. They got such a bad reputation, which was so unfair because it's a great band. They're really intense players. It's brilliant. You know, the only live King Crimson at all until The Great Deceiver in the early 90s was this in the USA, and it's must have been. I mean, Great Deceiver must have been such an eye opener for people who hadn't heard anything else, because they're a band that have been alive. You know, that so often that the album doesn't do the material justice. I think Islands probably does actually, as it happens. And you know, think about it, nothing from '69. The only thing from '69 was In the Court of the Crimson King album, which doesn't do it justice. So yeah, these are recordings from Jacksonville, Peoria, Orlando and Delaware. Sadly, Peoria is very incomplete, so it's not on CD, that's why we've not heard it, but it is downloadable. I don't know about Delaware, whether that's downloadable as well. You can have a look if you like. And as I said, it is a soundboard, but it's the most horrible soundboard ever. It must have been a shock at the time. You think about it, you've had those 4 albums, the measured, shiny, produced albums that all fit together into a group of 4, and then this dirty single disc live album. And you know, it wasn't released everywhere. I think maybe in America they declined to release it because of the sound quality. So yeah, like I said, the band are on fire, but unfortunately it sounds like the tapes were as well. Track 1 is 21st Century Schizoid Man. So for many years this was everyone's favourite version of 21st Century Schizoid Man. I think this band do it better than the Wenton band. That's a big thing to say, you know, but they're just more suited to it, I think. Possibly the definitive version. I think I prefer the one at Jacksonville. There's not a massive difference, obviously. Or maybe I'm just more forgiving because it's the Collectors Club. I'm not even sure. The sound is terrible, and Jacksonville I think actually has better sound than this. It does sound better, so I don't quite know. Don't know. It does seem this is the worst sounding soundboard, so they must have done something on the Collectors Club releases which they didn't do to Earthbound. Earthbound is authentic in that it sounds the same as this. I don't think it's remastered. I'll be very surprised if it's remastered. I can understand why, because obviously if they're going to remaster it, they'd do a show. And a lot of it is about the rhythm section. in that it's just substantially different, and they found their own way of playing it. This dirgy dun dun, which is brilliant. And obviously, Mel Collins is the star, as he always is on this stuff. I think this is the definitive sax solo, actually. Although overall, I prefer the Jacksonville one, and it's not on CD. Strangely, we've got all these CDs, and I think this is the definitive one. I like the quiet bit and then the mentalness. Track 2 is Peoria. This is jam. 7:30 jam. We've gone back over the Atlantic. We've gone over the Atlantic. Now the rhythm section were already over the Atlantic, and Mel Collins was on Atlantis. And this is a laid-back groove. You have to remember these improvisations that are actually jams were actually encores. So they were just playing at the end of the concert, You might have heard this if you went to Woodstock or something. It's that kind of thing, It's groovy. About 4 minutes, just as Collins starts to go mental, I think you can hear Ian Wallace saying something. It's amazing to hear that on a live album. Just one of the band shouting stuff out, And then the scatting starts. So we have Boz Burrell doing his scat thing, which is brilliant. The woos start to get a bit dodgy, a bit ridiculous, a bit, druggy Glenn Hughes whooping, or like on the Band of Gypsies album with that drummer. But it's very, very brief, so it's okay. Track 3 is The Sailor's Tale. Now, of course, all these Sailor's Tales around this time are fantastic, but it's funny how, because it's edited at the start, so it cuts into it rather than having Former Terror Lady. But the actual ending is cut off as well. It's amazing how it neuters it. The energy isn't there for some reason, although it is there because they're playing it. It just spoils it, and the sound isn't as good as some of the others. Fades it in. That's the end of side 1. So you turn the record over, and we have Earthbound. Okay, and this is another jam at the end of the concert. You've got some real screaming audience. Obviously, after they've played Schizoid Man, I assume, or something. So Ian Wallace starts a groove, but Fripp has a bit more contribution to this, and they're doing something much more interesting. With the Fripp sustain and stuff, and I think that leads them in a slightly more avant-garde direction. And it's actually a really good piece of music. I really like Earthbound. And then finally, the final track on side 2 is Groon. They took up the whole album with Groon. Of course, this would have been the first time a lot of people would have heard Groon because it was a B-side. It wasn't an album. It's really great when the sax comes in at the end of the Groon composition and they just start playing and the sax comes in. That's the best bit for me. And it's kind of, some of the things they're doing, I can't quite figure out what they're doing rhythmically, and you start to say, well, is that improvisation then? Because it's not just using established sounds. But yeah, they're doing something, I can't quite explain it, and it's partially because you can't hear it very well because of the sound. But then it reverts to a jam, I think, and then you got the drum solo, and then you've got the drum solo and VCS stuff. Now, it's not Peter Sinfield doing it, remember, he's left. It's one of the roadies. It doesn't make any difference because it's going noises. And just like, you can't do a freeform jazz improvisation to a festival crowd. You can't end a live album with a drum solo. Why? It's 15 minutes 30. If it had to be on one record, you could have, Circus should have been on this album. Pictures of a City should have been on this album. You take out Groon, you've got that. But obviously, I can see the logic in releasing it with, you've got Peoria and you've got Earthbound, which are new, and Groon a lot of people haven't heard, so there's an element of presenting new stuff rather than existing material played in a new way, I suppose. But yeah, there is a real curiosity. You don't need it in your collection unless you're a completist. Get some of these Cactus Club stuff because it's wonderful. See you next week for Live at Summit Studios.